Right, we'll go through it. Right, here we go. And I'll try to explain each one. We'll say why. Hopefully, I've had a lot of discussion. It sounds like you've been thinking about the why as well. By far the most complete wind data, special adjective, superlative, therefore the. Available in the United States, special noun, it's a name, it's, we talked about why those groups of nations, groups of states get a the. Liam, would you mind just shutting that door, please? Thanks. Reside in the records of the US Weather Bureau stations. So it's a particular group of records, modified, saying it's the records of this organisation. So it's post modification. The US Weather Bureau, name of organisation. And if you look, remember our rule about a name. If a name comes from a common noun, bureau, that's the head noun, isn't it? Then we put the. That's the tendency. It's under that section of special noun. Many of the stations previously mentioned have been in operation for more than one or more decades, and SAP has provided an excellent record-keeping centre at Asheville, North Carolina. One particular centre. It's not unique. There could be other excellent record-keeping centres. So the data can be easily retrieved. A typical or the typical? Both. You can decide. You can treat it. Both are okay. You can treat it generically. The typical surface wind observation, that's like a generic. A typical, one example of an average wind observation. You can look at either way, it's fine. From a slow-moving cup anemometer. Yeah. It's not generic. It's somebody's going and doing this here with a particular one, which hasn't been mentioned yet. So
there is the mounted.
Yes.
But it's not post-modification for.
Well, no, that is a bit of post-modification, but let's look at the post-modification. The question is, does it do this? Right. And, okay, we've got a slow-moving anemometer, that instrument, and it's mounted in a well-exposed location above, about 30 feet above the ground. Okay, now, there are thousands of those all over the United States, isn't it? Because that's the way you have to measure wind, and there are thousands of wind measurement points, so it's not unique.
So in the wind, exposed or without?
It's early.
A typical surface wind observation, or the typical surface wind observation, is usually obtained from a slow-moving cup anemometer and vane assembly, mounted in a well-exposed location, because it could be anywhere, it could be at an airport or an open field, it's not unique. About 30 feet above the ground, there's a special noun. Or a building structure, it's like any building structure, any, not that particular one. Now, the next one, you've got a choice. A vast majority, the vast majority. Just personally, I tend to say the majority. Some people will say a majority of people. Some will say the majority of people.
So both of them work?
Both of them work, yeah. The majority practice about majority would be the. That would be the most common, but you can say a majority.
We can't say a majority.
You can say a majority of, and vast is just a collocated adjective, isn't it? A vast majority, meaning not just a little minority like 53%, vast majority 80, 90, 100%. Of the sites previously mentioned, comparatively rare. The standard observation procedure. Now, I think you need a the here because standard is an interesting adjective. It's like a special adjective, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, your first day in the Weather Bureau, okay mate, this is the way you do it. This is how you take wind observation, the standard observation. If you do it a little bit differently, we get bad results and unreliable. You know, there's one way of doing this, and this is the standard.
Yeah.
And you have to, you know, make sure it's at 30 feet and take it, you know, so many times per hour and blah, blah, blah. So that standard narrows down, doesn't it? It's like, it's a pre-modifier. And in most cases, not like Russian or cultural or French, because most of the time these don't do that. But standard, pretty much every time. You know, the standard procedure for a fire evacuation is to go to the green sign. You know, there's only one way of doing it, isn't there? So you could put that in your bag of special adjectives. As I said, that list wasn't complete, and through experience you need to collect through, you know, careful thinking. And when they come up in this course, I'll kind of mention them, but no doubt there'll be others that you're going to have to just sort of collect independently once you're aware of the sort of principles. So the standard observation procedure is to note the indicated wind speed, and again, that one, there's, you know, you're looking at this thing, and there's only one indicated wind speed. This little gauge, maybe it's like this kind of gauge, you know, yeah, and there's your thing. It's that wind speed, isn't it? There, that's the one that it indicates. It can only indicate one speed. Can't indicate three speeds. So that word there in this context is sort of special, like a special adjective. It's pre-modifying it to the point of uniqueness. For a brief period, because a brief period.
Yeah.
Once each hour, record them to 10 degrees. And the nearest, there's a superlative, special adjective, the nearest mile per hour. Normally, a contacting device, it's not generic here, it's like saying, normally this thing, this particular thing is associated with the anemometer, the previous mentioned, and also generic. So normally, a contacting device is associated with the anemometer, from which one can obtain the time required for 1 mile of wind flow to pass the instrument. Now, the instrument, because previous mentioned, and also generic. So 2 reasons there. The time required, again, it's like this. You know, you make a measurement, and what's the particular time required for it to pass the instrument? And we're only going to get one result here. So it's modified to the point it's unique. Observations called puggles or radars are taken at many of the stations previous mentioned, using either visual or electronic tracking of a rising balloon. So these balloons are released. A rising balloon, many of them are several times per day. It's not a unique balloon, it's not generic. To determine the variation of wind with height. You could perhaps get away with not using it, but usually the variation of wind is in height. So again, the variation of wind with height, I'm guessing, because it's not my field, but we've got height, we've got wind, we've got some sort of, you know, curve on a particular day, depending on the atmosphere. We're going to get a particular result. You know, they're trying to determine this particular result, the variation of wind with height. On some days it's like this, on some days it's like this, you know. So you're trying to determine an exact unique thing. The data, so it's this collection that you end up with from your observations. Now notice that, the data, it doesn't say the data from these observations. In a way, it does say it, but it's not there. Is it? You and I know that's what they mean. It's been ellipsed. But really, there's close modification there, isn't it? The data from these observations is then, whatever it is, processed. Yeah, so here's a case of pretty big ellipses. But I think you probably consciously or unconsciously knew which special group of data they're talking about. They're not talking about general data, are they, from satellites or students' results or whatever. It's this particular group. Yeah. Not really. It's modification. It would be like this. The data from these balloons, right? The data from these observations is then processed. So it's the data which has been taken from these observations, right? So it's post-modification, but all of that is ellipsed because you and I already know that they're talking about that data. So ellipsis happens a lot, and you kind of have to be thinking about ellipsis sometimes to make these decisions. So again, this is one of the many reasons why this is a very difficult battleground. Lots of things to think about. And thinking about things that aren't there, for God's sake, ellipsis. You've got to think about ghosts when you do article work, It's not easy.
So this is ellipsis?
Ellipsis. Yes, ellipsed. That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is ellipsed post-modification. Yeah. Scary, isn't it? Alright, I don't know how you did. I reckon if you're getting like 70% at this point, because all these new rules are pretty confusing and you're floating around a bit, if you're getting a 7 out of 10 kind of score, you're doing very well. You've got a sound grasp of it. It's just, there are lots of little subtleties and complexities like what we just talked about. Sure, you're going to still get some not correct, but it's just going to be now processing and processing this thing, isn't it? And we've done one here. Perhaps I'll throw you one for...
Can you finish the last
We
one?
have the last one.
Sorry, the data, the last one, alright.
The wind.
Just trying to keep you excited. The data are processed to reflect the wind.
The wind.
I mentioned it a few days ago, the wind, the sun, the snow, the rain. Remember we had it with the radar one? We tend for weather elements to say the rain, the wind.
Not a reason, but
Not a reason.
we put the here, but we have thought that it's a post-modification.
Yeah,
There's
you could
above
think of
sea
it.
level.
Yeah, you could think of it like that as well. It's modified because it's the wind at this particular level, isn't it? Yeah. So again, there are more than one reason sometimes. Yeah.
About the sentence, normally a continuing device is associated with the
Yeah.
Yeah.
The anemometer, because you mentioned it before, and it's also generic. The anemometer, you're talking about this category of instrument. Yeah. Okay, see the next one. I don't like A. A's got too many subtle and complex things going on in it. I think there's no point doing stuff that gets confusing. Look at C, manned flight, the success story. We'll tackle that one tonight, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. I'll just read it through. It's about the first flight in a plane and about the space shuttle. On December 17th, 1903, how you say that, 1923 or 1903, two ways. Orville and Wilbur Wright successfully achieved sustained flight in power-driven aircraft. The first flight that day lasted only 12 seconds, over a distance of 37 metres, 120 feet. This is about length of space shuttle orbiter. The fourth flight of day and longest flight travelled 260 metres, 852 feet, in 59 seconds. The initial notification of the event to world was telegrammed to Wright's father. 66 years later, human being first stepped on lunar, moon, adjective of moon, lunar surface. An estimated 500 million people throughout the world saw the event on television. I was one of them. I remember that day. I was in primary school. And school was cancelled that afternoon. We all went home. Yeah, and I went to my best friend's place, Jim Sawyer. We sat there watching it on the black and white television for hours and hours. The guy wouldn't come out of the spacecraft for hours, it's so boring. 5 hours later he came out. Yay. Or listen to it on radio as it happened. This was surely a historic event. Historic events are spectacular. The space program, however, has always been much more than a television spectacular. Today, space transportation is working in many ways for us all, and we have come to expect this. A whole new era of transportation came into being in 1980s with development of the space shuttle. As transportation system to Earth orbit, it offers workforce capabilities of such earthbound carriers as trucks, ships and airliners. It is as vital to nations' future in space as the more conventional carrier of today is to countries' economic life and well-being. And there's an interesting case of the article in that last sentence. And it's interesting culturally and politically because, okay, this is an I'll just give you a bit of information to help you decide. It is an American book, and they're assuming, like Americans often do, that their audience is American and not the rest of the world. Yes, they're very kind of self-referential. The rest of the world doesn't exist. That's going on in that last sentence, and that will determine and dictate your decision about how you use the article. An interesting case of sort of culture and politics shaping grammar here. All right? So I'll just throw that out there for your consideration. All right, so have a go at B overnight. And
C.
Sorry, C, thank you. Yeah, so look, have this in front of you. I think this is the key to it all, and of course the 7 conditions are embodied in there, and you just have to get used to processing using this model, so that, in a week probably you could just write that out from memory, maybe you can already now, but just working with this. This, I think, getting control of this will solve about 95% of your problems. There are about 5% that are just kind of fixed phrases, and you're just going to have to, I guess, observe, and we'll practice this sort of thing through reading, just careful, meta-awareness, grammatical awareness when you're reading, and just noticing, oh, look at that fixed phrase, and that's got a "that" in it. Or a fixed phrase, and it's, sorry, just squeeze yeah. So, yeah, keep working with this. This will clear up most problems over time. Obviously, it's not going to happen immediately, and there are many complexities, but over months. Now, on Monday, remember, I showed you the resource where you can make these things yourself. I mean, all we're doing now is doing lots of those closed exercises that you can make yourself. And you're just going to make them and make them and do them and do them and do them. And I think now you've got the theory to get you through. As long as you're aware that, 5 or so% is also just what we call usage, just what people do. So it'll take time, but there we go. We've got the basics, and now we've done this. Now, as we read and discuss and so on, and look at writing, we can now, we've got a common language and common knowledge that we can apply to lots of article things. I won't worry about it. I just had. Have I shown you word count? Word count, where you can tell the frequency of any word. I don't know if I've shown you that. Maybe I'm going to show you that. Because it's useful for other things as well. Just before we break. Can we just knock off for lights, that'll be good. Thanks. I'll just drop this. Okay, this is on the Moodle. Wordcount.org, not .com. You get something quite different. It's wordcount.org. Show you where it's on the Moodle. It's up the top. In vocabulary. That little one there. Just after your Oxford Collocation Dictionary. So if you go to word count, you get a thing that looks like that. Just click on it. Launch word count. So what is it? It's an interactive presentation of the 86,800 most frequently used English words. Not looked at this yet? No? Okay. There it is. And it's a frequency list of 86,800 words. Why that number? Because when they looked at the British National Corpus, the 100 million words, they asked themselves, I think it was, how many words appear 120 times or more in this 100 million database? And the answer was this number of words. So that's why I've got this strange number. But what it is, it's quite a, I think, useful guide to the frequency of words in English. How common is a word, basically? Now, that's an important question for you often, like, oh, here's a new word. Do people really use this word? I've had that question asked of me all the time. You know, we're reading something in class, I explain a word. Do I really need to know this word? Do people really use it? Okay, this will answer that question for you. So, we know that 20,000 word point is graduate vocabulary. Okay, that's average, of course. What we can do is, in these little boxes, we can search. So I can put in here, if the graduate vocabulary is 20,000, I can put in 20,000, right? And I can find, what's the 20,000th word in English? There it is, it's a name, Falkland. So there are names in here which sort of mess up the data a little bit, because they're not sort of normal words. What about that word? Meticulously. Anyone know that word?
Meticulously.
Right. On the day you graduate from university, you'll know that word, you see. Meticulous. You do something meticulous, very carefully and precisely and exactly and with a lot of care. That's meticulous.
Does it come from the
I don't know the root. I'd have to look. You can go to the previous word. We can just go. Now that's an easy one, isn't it? Negatives. You know that. Congratulations, you've just graduated. Git. Now that's a funny one. Git. Git is British slang for an idiot. So what we've got is some quite formal, sophisticated words, but we've also got slang. So it makes no distinction. They're just all in together.
John, what is this numbers 99?
That's the rank. That is number 20,000 word, most common word in English, etc. So we're just going more common slowly.
Is there any specific reason to make them highlight and then, or just one?
Yeah. Just so that we can see where the word begins and ends, because if that was all black, it'd be really hard to read. I think that's why. This was actually designed by an artist, not a linguist. An artist got the linguistic information, and this whole thing is like is artistic. But I think we can use it for other purposes. Yeah, Parliament, backbenchers. Anyone heard that term? Yeah, good, all right, you're close to a graduate vocabulary. Scrubbing, that's very scrubbing in the bath, scrubbing the floor, I bet you know that. And so on and so forth. Proust, that's a name. It's the French writer, so is that. And so on and so forth. Quite a few names here. Let's go back to the beginning with rank. And that's why I'm showing you. There's the very bad news, everybody. Yes. What we've been struggling with for the last few days is the most common word in English. Yeah. And if you actually look at the data, I've drawn it here because I was talking to Mohammed about it. It's 6% on average of a text. That's a lot, you know. So if you make article errors, the frequency of the error is pretty high, isn't it? This is the problem. It doesn't disturb the meaning a lot usually, but you just have this certain frequency of error through your piece. And even level 4 people and into 4 plus are still struggling with this, and this is, you know, one of the reasons why it sort of dominates in people's writing is because it is 6%. And it drops rapidly like this. That was a guess, 3%. I just looked it up. It's about 2%. So by the time you're getting to here, you're at 2%. And then, of course, it goes down slowly. So 2%, 6%, you've got 8% basically of your text. So 1 in every 12 words is one of these articles. So that's quite a bit you can make errors on. You know.
You did mention about word or are, even not change the meaning of the word, like the meaning of the paragraph. Why
Sometimes
so,
it can, but
why so
often not.
fussed about if you not change any meaning or?
I said it doesn't disturb meaning much. It will. It'll confuse the reader for a minute. Are you talking about general data or are you talking about the data collected from the weather station? Right? That's a momentary confusion, isn't it? So it has a function.
That means is it, the meaning is if we're not really 100% correct, that somebody can cherry pick around in there to beat you.
It's not so much that. It's just there'll be a certain lack of precision in both your grammatical form and your meaning. Yeah. But it's not like, okay, if you make a verb error and you said, I will come yesterday, that's really much more confusing. That's a deep structural error that really affects meaning a lot. If you use article errors, less problematic, yeah, generally. Okay, but however, this site, you can use it for other purposes. I just wanted to bring it up because I wanted to demonstrate that point, that, you know, it's very common and therefore you do need to get control of this.
Oh, I can use just like one.
Well, I'm just going to demonstrate how. What if we take an article, what about that article we were just reading on weather? Was there a word there that was new for you? Or maybe...
Number B.
Yeah, B, or even the article before. Anomaly, yeah, anometer, okay. And, there we go, spelling right. So find word, you see find word there? Anemometer, how common is that word? I'm guessing it's way beyond graduate vocabulary, it's probably about 50,000. Right, not even there. Did I spell it right?
A-N-E-M-O.
Result in
M-E-T-E-R.
Yeah, I'm just going to...
Anemometer.
Right. Yeah, it's there. All right. So it's about like 70,000.
Very specific.
Yeah. Very specific. Look at this word here. You know, defibrillator. So, you know, medical device, isn't it? We're up into the technical, highly specific technical.
But very near with uncounted, surprisingly.
Yeah, 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 it is. I know. You get some surprises in here. If we just go back, say, a couple, let's see what... Wangle, okay. You wangle something, like you manipulate, slang. Newhouse, name. Name. The people who live in Czechoslovakia, okay. Probably, I don't know what that is. And these must be names. Conversationalists, okay. My point is, you see, you can put words in here that, you know, if you want to know, look, what I would do, your target should be graduate vocabulary, 20,000. So if you're reading something, in the next few weeks we'll do stuff on memorising a word. And when you memorise a word, you really have to put in about 10 minutes, quarter of an hour of work, and we'll look at what that work is. It's doing lots of different tasks, really, with a word. Now, you probably come across 20, 30 new words a day. You know, you can't do that with every single one. You've got to be economical with your energy. So if you decided on, okay, 3 or 4 or 5 words a day, but the best way to decide is words that are this side of 20,000 should be your goal for the next, say, year or two. Once you've probably got it back up at 20,000, okay, then start moving on, you know. No point in learning this sort of stuff at this point, is it? You're not going to come across these words very often.